The end of the year. A great time to reminisce on the past. Achievements, memories, last year's top 10 best games because you procrastinated until the last minute again. Top 10 games of 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. What did all of those videos have in common? They were all late. The only video for this series that I posted on time was the 2017 one, and that video is outdated as hell. I gave like the worst Finding Paradise summary because I was definitely not part of the target age demographic, and I completely missed the point, and I still posted it thinking it was okay. Anyway, this time for sure. Welcome back to the top 10 video games I've played in 2022, or the Scrags Game Awards of 2022. The rules for this list are simple. I can only pick a game that I beat in 2022, I can only include games I've beaten for the first time, so no replay playthroughs, but remakes and remasters are okay. And I can only include one game per series. And with the rules and conditions set, let's... Multiverses is one of those games that looked really promising. It was free to play, another crossover platform fighter, and it had an interesting focus on 2v2 gameplay. And then the game came out, I forgot about it, and then the game went back into development. Yeah, this is the interchangeable game slot for this top 10 list. Compared to something like Nick All-Star Brawl or Rivals of Aether, the game didn't really get me to stick. I wasn't too big of a fan of the floaty gameplay, and the game felt really sluggish to move around in. That being said, I did like some of the movement options the game had, as they felt really nice to string together. And I also realized how many Warner Bros. Characters I didn't grow up with or recognize. For context, the one singular character I was excited to play in this game was Tom and Jerry. I'm not going to comment on the multiplayer too much, because honestly I think I only tried online once and I barely remember anything about it. Yeah, this game just wasn't for me, and that's okay. I think the experimental things it tried to do were interesting, but the gameplay just didn't really mesh with me too much. Still looking forward to seeing what's to come when the game comes back online though. I'm starting to realize how many multiplayer games I'm just now trying in 2022. If you've been on the internet throughout 2020, you've heard about this game already, so I'll spare you the details. But I never really got to play it until it went free to play and got added to Switch. I've seen so much gameplay of it online, so I'm excited to finally give this game a shot. And then the game broke down on me, but at least it was really funny. I'm glad I got to try it out for a brief moment in time though, even if a bit late. Yeah, really starting to stretch the definition of a top 10 here. The game concept is still fun, and for the bit of time I did play, I got to queue up with some friends and had a good time. The game felt about what I expected from the gameplay I've seen online, yet it was still fun to try and make your way through the pack and try to make it before the cutoff point. I really like games like these and hope to get the opportunity to play it more in the future. But I was kind of asking for this when I decided to play this on the Switch, I guess. Alright, now we're heading into some more games that actually released in 2022. Next up is Nintendo Switch Sports. This one I'm unfortunately really mixed on. Again, stretching the definition of a top 10 here. I like some of the sports in this pack, but the sport I was most excited for was a huge letdown. Everyone was throwing so much shade at badminton for being too similar to tennis, but as a badminton player myself, I was really excited for this game specifically. I've seen the amount of depth that this game had firsthand, and was really hoping to prove those people wrong to show just how cool this sport can be. And they didn't do any of that. They simplified the sport so much that it basically turned into a game of who gets the flimsy hit first. It's virtually impossible to get an out in this game, which is what made the risk reward of having one shot to return the birdie to the other side of the net so interesting. They removed like half of the shots you could make in this game, as well as strength control and mix-up options with things like clears, net shots, drop shots, which are arguably the most important part of badminton. The only moves you can do is a basic swing, something that slightly resembles a drive, a drop shot of sorts, and a smash only available to you if the opponent messes up. It was so disappointing to see how watered down this game became, because this could have had the opportunity to become a really cool, faster-paced sport to include in the roster. There's a lot more to take in with this game, like the way online is handled, the number of sports available at launch compared to past titles, and golf being the only thing to look forward to as a free update. Of course, there's nothing wrong with golf, but it's just the fact that it was the only thing to expect. And considering how this game seemed to be performing, is probably the only sport we should be expecting to expect. All the other sports are kinda cool though. I like the combo mechanic of volleyball, tennis is still a good time, chambara or sword fighting making a return is really cool, I actually had to pull out my game case so I could remember the last sport. It was soccer. Yeah, I can see why I forgot about soccer. Bowling is always a good time. Anyway, at least this game still has bowling.
Nice try.
You ever just get bored scrolling through the NSO service and end up trying out a random game in order to actually attempt to make use of the full experience? That was me when I landed upon Tough Enough. It was a 2D fighter. I seem to have a really good sense for randomly stumbling upon 2D fighters, but this 2D fighter plays a bit more simply compared to the ones I'm used to. Honestly though, I think it made the experience more interesting because of it. You can select one of 4 characters for the game's main arcade campaign, but with the cheat code, you can unlock anyone for multiplayer play. The button inputs are relatively simple, giving you very little variation in attacks, forcing you to get creative with how you approach interactions. Each character has their own special inputs too, which I slowly figured out as I made my way through the campaign through experimentation and mashing, but I didn't really know what they were until I found a guide for it online. And also the music for some of the stages are pretty good. For a random game I found in the sea of non-first party NSO titles, I still had a pretty good time with it. Pokemon Shining Pearl, the game I beat 10 minutes before the year ended. The finale video will come eventually, hopefully. Now, you of sound mind might be asking yourself, why the hell is this ranked so high? And to those of you who are already aware, does this really surprise you? Let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. This game is a clear case of missed potential, where, assumedly, Game Freak just didn't seem like they wanted to make it. They gave this game one of the most highly anticipated games in the series, besides Hoenn remakes, to another company called Ilka, which is something they've never done before for a mainline title. They turned it into a faithful remake, which is something they've never done before for a remade title. No character redesigns, no capture the flag, and they didn't even make a TCG set for this game, which is something they did for every other remake. How am I supposed to complete my Natdex binder now? It does not feel like a mainline title. It does not feel like a Pokemon remake, it doesn't even mix in future Pokemon up to Gen 8, and it tragically does not include any of the elements that made Platinum so beloved by the community. That being said, it's still Sinnoh, so it's not a terrible experience at least. And frankly, I've had worse. This game has general improvements such as faster movement, especially with surfing. It's even got some pretty cool things too, like an overhauled Elite Four, so much for faithful remakes, and then some general setbacks like removing infinite TMs and this nightmare of a legend Mount Coronet because of the control changes. It tries to bring back fan favorite stuff like the following Pokemon from Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and while some of the results are funny, it does admittedly look weird when some Pokemon you'd expect to catch up don't really do that. The scaling of the models too are kinda weird, but I don't actually hate the chibi art style. Plus I do really miss top-down gameplay. But despite everything, I don't hate it. I had fun with the game regardless. But even if it's a fun nostalgia trip for me, I can also acknowledge that Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl as remakes leave a lot to be desired. They're not necessarily bad because of the base the game was built upon, but definitely not up to par with the other remakes considering the potential the game had. I understand why people thought this game to be lacking, and still agree with some of these points even if I had a good time with my experience. I don't see enough people talking about that missing BDSP TCG set though. When this was added to the NSO roster, I was really excited to give my first F-Zero experience a shot. I also heard that this one was the one that supposedly had the Mario Kart 64 Rainbow Road in it, so I wanted to see what it was like in this engine. What I experienced instead was a masterfully crafted, fast-paced, action-focused racing experience. This game goes crazy! I dabbled with the original SNES game for a bit, but this game was the one that really got me hooked on the core gameplay of F-Zero. Being able to ring people out of the race, the risk-reward of balancing your boost, which shares the same meter as your health, the thrill of being up in front driving at crazy speeds. I mean, yeah, Mario Kart will still stay as my favorite racing game experience, but this take on racing is also just as fun. The high-octane gameplay felt like it would work really well with multiplayer too, with actual stakes and a more satisfying reward to actually completing races, because you not only cross the finish line, but you also survive to make it there. And fortunately, my prayers were answered just a couple months later. You know what? I get it now. I'm F-Zero pilled now. They got me. Now I want multiplayer F-Zero. They added a classic mode for F-Zero 99, which was basically exactly what I wanted from this experience. You already know what's making it on the list next year.
Yeah! The final lap!
One of my favorite games of all time on the Nintendo DS is New Super Mario Bros. Say what you want about the new series of platformers, but I think the original holds up really well, even compared to the other 3 installments, thanks to the fresh ideas, enemies, and levels that the game provides. To this day, nothing that came before or after it to me could match New Super Mario Bros, though that could also be the nostalgia talking. That's not to say I didn't like other 2D Mario games, but none of them just seemed to hit the same note that New Super Mario Bros did, at least for me. But whenever I had someone else to play with, my go-to minigame was the Mario vs. Luigi game. A multiplayer, one-on-one battle between you and your opponent, with the simple goal to collect a set number of stars before either of your lives run out. And when I learned someone made an expanded version of this minigame with even more player support, more rules and customization options, new maps, new power-ups, and even new songs, I had so much fun playing this with my friends, just messing around with how insane we can make the rule set and just trying to sneak by all those mega mushrooms in order to collect enough stars to win. The game controls really well, it is incredibly solid, but even when the game does bug out a bit, it always makes for some really funny moments. This is pure chaos, with enough to guarantee a very good time whether you're just playing with one other person like the original, or with a ton in the room. This project shows that a clear amount of love was put into this, and it was awesome being able to relive my childhood with this very welcome expansion. Anyway, here's a plug for my video that I made on it last year. It's freaking Puyo Puyo Tetris time, baby! What do you get when you add even more story to a charming cast of characters, expanding the world and interactions that occurred in the first game? Peak. That's what. Which is why it's ranked number 3, of course. This game adds even more characters, even more game modes, and I don't know what else to say because it's just Puyo Puyo Tetris. And that's all it needs to be. Just having even more options like this adds so much to the game, even if the gameplay is virtually the same as the last one. Popping this game in every now and again is always great, and definitely one of my more memorable experiences of 2022. For a top 3 entry in this video, it's kinda weird having this section as short as it is. But I don't really know how to end the segment off besides the fact that it's freaking Puyo Puyo Tetris, baby! This is one of those games that I've been trying to get into for the longest time, especially with how many people have been praising it as a modern Kirby title. I had played Forgotten Land this year, but I was still kind of adjusting to the new 3D gameplay, so I didn't really get into it at first. Throughout the first 2 worlds, I had kinda just thought to myself, man, now I kinda wanna play a 2D Kirby game. So whenever I had some time to kill, like maybe a power outage or something, I pulled out my copy of Planet Robobot and beat it then. And I can't believe I almost missed out on the only modern Kirby game with Mirror in it. This game is incredible! From the presentation, to the levels, to the bosses, to the new and returning abilities, this is an absolute delight of a game that still manages to feel like a 2D Kirby game, while also introducing elements to make it feel so different all at the same time. One of these unique features is the Robobot armor, which allows Kirby to pilot a giant mech. It even changes depending on what ability you use, and sometimes changes the gameplay of the level entirely, such as if you use Jet Kirby. This game is so cool, and playing it to completion had made me understand what everyone had been talking about regarding this game. I get it now. The reason 2D Kirby games haven't hit the same since is because they still haven't brought Mirror Kirby back as a staple! So with that out of the way, what could my number 1 game of 2022 be? Elden Ring? I never really got into the Dark Souls type of games, so I didn't really get into it when it came out. God of War Ragnarok? I don't have a PlayStation. However, I almost did, because of this game. And Final Fantasy VII Remake, but then both of them went multi-platform and it made my life a lot easier. I had so much fun with this game, considering the fact that I put like 165 hours into my first run and have about 300 hours in total taking into account my New Game Plus run, and that's still not done. I'd say it's a miracle that I even got to finish it within 3 months. You know, considering my track record. The battle mechanics were really fun and engaging, and this is from someone who usually mashes through the RPG mechanics. But the system encouraged me to think more whenever I made decisions in battle, even against the smaller shadow enemies, while still being flexible enough to let me use my favorite characters and cores whenever I wanted. You know, except for a certain boss fight. The palace system was really cool, having this one giant dungeon to explore and sneak around in, alongside some unique treasures that'll help you in future palaces. The extra tension of the time limit, as well as managing your time outside of palaces, was also a feature that I really liked. Speaking of what you do outside the palaces, that was the main draw for me for the Persona series. As a farming sim enjoyer, I really like being able to interact with the characters and being able to see their stories separate from the main plot. And with each character's confinement ranks, as well as the main story as well being very plot heavy, this really felt like this game had everything for me. From story, to characters, to gameplay, and even just the way the game handles it all. Even when the game got frustrating, I still wanted to keep going. Even when I beat the final boss and there was a bug in the Switch version that could soft lock you into the loading sequence, never loading the final cutscene. Don't get me wrong, the pacing is very slow. Palaces take hours to beat and there is a lot of dialogue. But everything about this game was so addicting that I just had to know what was next. Eagerly anticipating where the stories would go from there, what kind of characters I'd meet, and what kind of scenarios the characters would come across next. I have another document where I do a full retrospective of the games that I play every year, and this video section is just a summarized version of it. Because in that document, my Persona 5 Royal section was 4 pages long. Granted, that's including spoilers and stuff, and that was also me trying to keep it brief, but that's just how much of this game just wowed me. I could talk about this game for hours, and it's one of those games that felt built for me. Very excited to check out the other Persona titles after this one, but first I should probably finish that New Game Plus run, huh? And that's my top 10 list for 2022. Really cutting it close, but I finally caught up with my backlog for these videos. Next year, as usual, I'll do this again for 2023, and hopefully with less dishonorable mentions. If you've made it to the end, I want to give a heartfelt thank you for watching this ranking video. It means a lot to me that you gave this video a shot outside of the funny me games and the farming stuff and all. And if you're new, feel free to do the funny YouTube stuff if you enjoyed the video and want to see more of this type of content from me. Doing it on this video specifically is the best way to let me know. And with that, I will see you all next year in 2024. Hopefully the next top 10 won't be right at the end of the year again though.